Welcome back! If you have not watched the previous two parts of this series, go do that. I talk a lot about my criteria in those videos and have already rated those tracks, but just as a quick refresher, this is a mostly gameplay-based tier list because very few people really look at these tracks in terms of how good they race, and I care a lot more about the gameplay. So that's what you will be seeing here. Will the WiiU DLC tracks finally pass the allegations of Mario Kart 8 track design being terrible? We're just gonna have to watch and find out. Now, let's talk about Yoshi Circuit, because Yoshi Circuit is an exemplary track. A lot of people really like to take this track and complain about the fact that you can no longer do the tunnel shortcut, but to me, I go back to Double Dash, and there is just no competition. This version that we have in 8 is a superior version in every merit, in my opinion. Because yes, that cool tunnel shortcut was a really cool idea, but Double Dash wasn't immune to the problems that Mario Kart 8 has, because that shortcut was barely faster, if at all. Now compare that to the Mario Kart 8 version, where we not only have everything else that makes the Double Dash version great, but we even have this really cool no item shortcut that allows for a little bit of skill expression in a place that really meaningfully matters. And in addition to rewarding expert players who use this level geometry to their advantage, it also helps newer players because there's grass cuts in a lot of places that can really meaningfully grab you a lot of spots, especially that shortcut at the beginning. So ultimately what you get is a perfect circuit track that caters to both kinds of players in a way that's really meaningful, and in any other game where there is not 96 other tracks to compete with it, this would easily make a top 10. But now we get to Excite Bike. Moving on.
Yo, Excite Bike?
Oh god dang it.
So, my name is Cyan, and I'm here to defend the funny track known as Excite Bike Arena. It is so funny when we're playing Mario Kart Online, and out of all the tracks in the game, Excite Bike comes up, and while all my friends are moaning and groaning, I'm just like, yo! It's Excite Bike! It could come up with other tracks that I like way more, like Madrid, and then I'd still pick it because it's Excite Bike. But, unironically, I think this track is C tier. First off, the fact that it changes every time you race on it, with the mud and the ramps being in different locations, I think is really cool. The fact that you'll never know exactly where the mud or the ramps are going to be, you'll never know how you're going to have to trick through everything. You're kind of freestyling it for the first lap, and I think that's a cool feature of it. I think the fact that this track is such a faithful recreation based on this 1980s video game that nobody would have thought about, I think it's cool to have something that's so consistent with how Excite Bike actually was as a game. Also, unironically, the music in this is exceptional. I love chiptune music. Finally, I think this track is a really good beginner's track. It teaches the basics of tricking and learning how to get your drifts. And I think it also teaches a bit about making sure that you know how to avoid things, because not only do you have to adjust to the items every race, but you also have to adjust to the locations of the ramp. So new players won't just be able to memorize the track layout and immediately do the optimal stuff. They're gonna have to change it with every time, and I think that's the beauty of Mario Kart. No two races are the same. But yeah, that's my defense for Excite Bike. And Red Pandas are S tier. And I love Excite Bike, it's so fucking cool! You just get to go and you hear the cool music.
You drive in a straight line, you shake your controller, you take a right turn, then you drive in a straight line and shake your controller again. That's all there is to it. And I guess for some people you actually do press the button. If you're like me and like to trick you using motion control, it's even less engaging. Cyan picks it to spite us every single time, and Leah hates the track so much that she takes a vow of silence. And if you know anything about Leah, it's that normally she never shuts the fuck up. I love her, by the way. Dragon Driftway. I keep wanting to put Dragon Driftway high, but Dragon Driftway is kind of notorious, for me anyway, as being in the track that I can always say, yeah, I like this track, but then never a single time in my life do I ever actually pick it. And I don't really know why that is, but I think the fact that I have lukewarm things to say about it deserves B tier, but the fact that it never gets picked, I keep wanting to put Dragon Driftway in like A tier or something like that, but I just never want to pick it. And I think the fact that I never want to pick it, I think there is something internally that I'm ignoring there about the fact that if I don't ever want to pick it, then is it really that good of a track? And I feel like my answer to that is probably not. I think it still deserves the moniker of being in B tier, because it is still a track that I think I have positive feelings about. It's a well-designed track that I enjoy. It does a lot where it's like, yeah, this is good, but it's like it's never something I want to drive, and it's weird. But that's my take on Dragon Driftway. And as if my thoughts on this track weren't complex enough already, I will now forever associate this track with one of the most insane endings to a tournament I have ever seen to this day. Mute City is a weird one. Mute City, I used to really love the F-Zero tracks, and the F-Zero tracks, I was one of those guys who put the F-Zero tracks as my 2 favorite tracks in the game. That is no longer the case. My eyes have been opened to the flaws of Mute City. I still think I kind of like it, but it does have front run syndrome, where it can feel like oftentimes your items don't matter. And for some reason, I don't know if this is just a Mute City thing or if this is just a really weird coincidence, but Mute City has had this really weird pattern of, I feel like I will be in like a bottom spot at the end of lap 3. I will go to an item to be like, okay, I can save the race if I can just get an item that allows me to take the shortcut, and like I can make some meaningful move here. And then in like 10th place, I get a single mushroom. I think there's something broken on Mute City with how its items are balanced. But on top of that, the boost panel section at the very beginning of the track kind of dictates how you have to play it to such a degree that I feel like it just becomes this like back spam haven, where if someone's in front of you and you're wanting to keep up with them and taking the line that's optimal, they can just throw a shell back at you and you can't really do anything about it. All you can do is respect their space, and it's just like this really weird thing. There's a few other things about Mute City that I think I like. The ending shortcut is really fun, and I think it can result in some very cinematic moments. There's some off-road shortcuts that are really fun. I enjoy the dynamic of getting coins through the healing pads, but it's like, it's not like, it doesn't do a whole lot right, other than just having that F-Zero flare, which still does carry it pretty far. Wario's Gold Mine. Oh, this one's a tough one. Have I had enough time to forgive Wario's Gold Mine? I don't think I have. To D tier with you. Wario's Gold Mine, it feels like very overscaled, where it feels like the track is much larger than it needs to be, and on top of that, they've removed the only real challenge the track really gave, partially due to it being so wide, partially due to the fact that minecarts don't even hurt you, and partially due to the fact that they took away the shroomless shortcut actually mattering. The extra path to the side, for one, you wouldn't even normally, you wouldn't even experience the risk of taking that route in Mario Kart 8 because of the fact that the minecarts don't have hitboxes, but even worse than that, it's not even faster. Like, what's even the point? Like, how do you mess up a remake this badly? It's just a very flawed track, and it's like, I feel like I should normally be very excited about a Wario Gold Mine remake, but it just doesn't do anything right, and it's unfortunate. As for SNES Rainbow Road, yeah, it's SNES Rainbow Road. I'm never exactly in the mood to like, yeah, I want to play SNES Rainbow Road. Like, that's not really the kind of thing that happens, but like, it certainly is SNES Rainbow Road, and it plays well, and it's like, it does what it needs to. The one thing that's fucked up is the fact that it's not the last track in the goddamn cup it's in! It's literally the second race in the why? Why did they do this? It pisses me off even now. It's a good track. I just never feel in the mood to play it. It has a lot going for it. Otherwise, it's okay. I enjoy it. It's a very skill-based track. There's a lot to enjoy about it. It's just not one that ever stands out from the pack as one that I want to race on. Ice Outpost. This is probably the furthest any single track has fallen in my rankings, because I used to rank Ice Outpost as one of my top 10. It has a few of these just difficult cuts that are like very high risk with like a small amount of reward, and I like that aspect being allowed to be involved, where it feels like you can make these smaller moves for higher places. The problem is that those small moves you can make are too small. They don't actually affect the race in any meaningful capacity. Where if you're doing everything right, you can still just kind of get stuck in a pack here. Not to a point to where it feels like you're getting hit by every item necessarily, but it certainly feels like you're stuck in a pack in the fact that you can't get anywhere in a lot of cases. It feels like you can chain like 5 stars in a row, and you'll pass maybe 1 or 2 people. It just doesn't feel like it accomplishes anything, and it's kind of hard to contest the front run on this track. But I think that's kind of my main problem with it. I'm not going to say I hate it. I don't have the same problem with it as I do Wario's Gold Mine, but it's that same Mario Kart 8 syndrome. Hyrule Circuit makes me upset. I don't really know how to describe it. I feel like out of principle I should probably put it in C tier, but I don't think I can do that. I don't think I can justify doing that. Because Hyrule Circuit is a really weird track where it feels like it knows what it wants to be, but it doesn't really feel like it taps into it very well. The lines are decent enough, like for the first few minutes, but then when you get to the castle part, I feel like that all goes out the window because I feel like the master shortcut doesn't work as a concept. And there's one particular streamless shortcut that you'll see pros do that I feel like is just like the most just like try-hardy of streamless shortcuts in the game. I feel like in order to have any chance to really play this track correctly, you have to have put a lot of time into this track to lab out this shortcut because it makes such a big deal that it can save you seconds at a time, like multiple seconds. Like it can single-handedly win you the entire race. Oh, but TJ, I thought you liked skill expression in shortcuts. Whatever happened to being able to express your skill in a meaningful way? Well, this one's different because it's neither easy to learn nor fun to pull off. And it's just like, okay, but like, what does it take to do that? And it's a lot of grinding on time trial. It just tends to make me upset when there's someone who is going that hard in just like most regionals I'm in. And it doesn't feel like a satisfying one to take. I don't get much out of it. So, Baby Park. I mean, I'm surprised people are excited to hear what I have to say about Baby Park, because I feel like I've made my stance clear on it, which is just to say that it's not the same. It's very much not the same. People like Baby Park because it's this chaotic thing where it's like, oh, you have to worry about all these different items. And I feel like the most I get out of Baby Park in this game is mild annoyance. I feel like the items don't affect gameplay enough to where I really ever experience anything on this track when I get hit by an item than just like, oh, well, I've gone from like a second or like a third to now I'm in like a fifth or a sixth. And I'm going to get items that will enable me to get back up to those higher spots. And I feel like I don't get the chaos that I expect from Baby Park in this iteration of Baby Park, because the developers were cowards and decided to put a barrier in the middle. The item play of Mario Kart 8 just doesn't lend itself as nearly as much to the chaos. The iframes make this problem even worse, of the fact that you never have combos happen. I could see Baby Park in this game being really fun if you went custom items and went like only bombs or something crazy like that. But like in base Mario Kart 8 item play, most items don't lend itself well to contributing to the chaos of Baby Park. And it's very much here for the sake of being here. Nintendo knows that it's a meme track, and they were like, yeah, it's easy enough, we can just throw that in there. But it just doesn't live up at all to what I would want a Baby Park to be. And I feel like that ruins the vibe for me. Ironically, the part of Baby Park that I enjoy is the fact that it's just kind of satisfying to just hold a really long continuous drift for the whole thing. Because of the fact that it's literally just 2 U-turns without the annoying straightaway of Excite Bike, you just get to hold these really long drifts that always feel decent to come out. And if that's not enough for you, you can get a little bit daring and you can hold those extra long mini turbos right over the off-road and take a little streamless shortcut there that most of the time won't even save you very much time, but like it's another thing you can do, and it's just like another way that you can play the game, and I think that's cool. But like, no, it doesn't live up to anything of what Double Dash has. All of that to say. Now, Cheese Land is really interesting because I feel like Cheese Land is the single track that I have the least idea of where to put it now. In my original tier lists before Wave 6, it was consistently at the bottom of my list because it is the other Dry Desert, in which it is the other track in which, just from playing online, I have noticed the pattern of people taking the track so unseriously that they will decide to bag instead of actively participate in the race. And I feel like any track that encourages that behavior deserves a lot of reprimanding and being like, this track is very bad for that reason. But now that they've nerfed bagging, I feel as though that might not be as big of an issue. It's possible that it is, and I could be overthinking this. And I think this might be the one track that I feel like the bagging changes might genuinely change in a positive way. Here's the thing. If you take away all of the bagging problems it has, it's actually a pretty fun track to drive. I enjoy the way Cheese Land drives, and if it didn't have bagging problems, it would probably be in B tier for me. But that bagging is unignorable, and it's more annoying than any joy I get from driving it normally. I still like the GBA version more. It was space themed originally, and I think that did make it better. But also, GBA had a lot more creative of ways the shortcuts are actually implemented, whereas I feel like a lot of that inherent creativity was lost just from the fact that we're in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and the fact that you can't really hide away shortcuts quite like that anymore. Whereas I feel like the GBA version's philosophy with it was much more of yeah, there's ramps on these tracks, but like, it's how you decide to use these ramps that tends to change everything about how it works. But other than that, it's all around okay. Wild Woods is another Mario Kart 8 Syndrome track where there's no shortcuts. There's a couple fun things you can do, but like, it's just more Mario Kart 8 Syndrome. In terms of what the anti-grav has to offer for the track design, I'm sorry to tell you this, but it's literally just a straightaway. Anti-grav is a cool idea that never gets meaningful use, because anytime an anti-grav section comes up, it just means the track is going to get especially forgiving with what lines you can take, and usually it's going to be that you're driving in a straightaway. And in Mario Kart 8, driving in a straightaway is not even like close to fun. At least not without anything in your like path, like without anything to like immediately feel like it. I think it's a cool idea, but the whole thing's a bit sideways though. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Mario Kart 8 has a lot of cool ideas, but I'm looking at particularly the execution of it.
Oh, you're here to look at the execution of it, eh? Well, I'm about to host yours.
What the?
Sorry to say, everyone, but we're interrupting your regularly scheduled programming to give you an opinion from someone who actually likes this game.
Hey!
You know, I really didn't want to do this to you, TJ. I respect you. You're my friend. But I'm sorry you've gone too far this time. It's bad enough you slandered Shy Guy Falls.
I rated C.
But no, you just had to go and insult my favorite track in the game. Wild Woods is the best Mario Kart track. This thing is gorgeous, a pure spectacle. You're driving up a tree, then down a waterfall. There's a Shy Guy village. There's so much world building here. You could write a whole fantasy novel around these guys, and I would read every page of it. And then there's the variety. This is one of the only tracks in the game where you are switching between every mode of transport in one track. I don't think it's actually one of the only ones that does that, but I'm gonna keep this point in.
And it doesn't even have an underwater section.
Fuck you. You start driving, then anti-gravity, then driving some more. The air glide a bit. Ooh, and look at this, you're going down the water. It's making you speed up. It was what taught me that I loved Mario Kart. Well, tolerate it, and then I learned to love it later. I know it's nothing too insane, but this is a great course, and I think that it deserves more respect, especially from you, TJ.
That's great and all, but will you get out of here?
Okay, I'm gonna leave now before you call the cops.
And look, I don't want to just like hate these Mario Kart tracks for literally no reason. I like to believe that I have pretty objective criteria for how I rate things, and I'm not playing Mario Kart for the world building, I'm here for the races. So Animal Crossing is a pretty good track. I have positive things to say about it, but I think similar to Dragon Driftway, it's not ever a track that I feel like voting for. It has good lines, I enjoy it, the apples falling out of the tree is fun. It does have my favorite Animal Crossing villager, good old Chief, love that guy. But otherwise, ending shortcut's pretty fun. You get a lot of chaos on some of the more narrow parts. The items at the glider section are a little bit flawed, but I feel like each update that's slowly been getting fixed because they're making it so items respawn faster and faster. But ultimately, I don't have all too much to say about this stage, so I'll leave this one to B-Rice, one of my good friends who is inexplicably good at every video game he picks up, and arguably one of the best Isabelle players in the world for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate.
Okay, so my thoughts on the Animal Crossing Mario Kart stage. I think overall, really good track. I think having 4 different forms, the variety works towards it to keep it not getting still. It has small layout changes. And then the winter one has like the ice physics. And then it has cute little Animal Crossing charms. I am, of course, very biased on those with all the villagers in the background. You got Rossetti. But then it's also just enjoyable to drive on because you got nice off-road shortcuts in parts of it, and you really have to think about which route you take. I find myself taking different routes often, but that's kind of what I think about Animal Crossing stage.
Neo Bowser. This is a really weird track, because the more I play it, the more I actually think I tend to like it. It's not anything super crazy, but it's a track that is 100% down to its lines. It is a track that shows the degree of technicality that a Mario Kart player has in a way that's not just whether or not, like, oh, is there a shortcut that can make things matter, and like, does item play matter in every regard? Like, no, not necessarily. But what Neo Bowser City does offer is some of the most skill-intensive lines in the game, And I think that is something that is worth commending, because it genuinely feels extremely satisfying when you see someone who's racing ahead of you and being able to pass them by doing nothing but just brake drifting on the inside corner, and it's full on initial D bullshit. It's a satisfying thing that I think goes a long way, and I think I like that a lot. It's a track that rewards fundamentals, and I think it does so in a very meaningful way, in a way that no other track really feels like it does. And because of that, I'd say it's a sleeper pick for A tier. Alright, so Ribbon Road is a weird one, because I feel like I started off really hating this track, then I warmed up to it, and now it's just back into the middle. It's back into the conglomerate. It's
my absolute favorite track in all of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe.
Oh, so you got this one?
Yeah, I got this.
Nice. I actually didn't even have that much to say about this one.
Heyo, Lorelei, aka Creamsicle here. The version of Ribbon Road that appears in 8 Deluxe is, in my opinion, one of, if not the single most drastically reimagined iterations of a classic Mario Kart track. Containing very few straightaways, Ribbon Road is concerned about one thing and one thing only: effective use of drifting. While every track requires good use of the drift mechanic in order to be properly raced, here, things are turned up to 11. A quick glance of this track's minimap reveals its twisting, winding nature. This leads Ribbon Road to being what is, in my opinion, one of the hardest tracks in the entire game. Now that being said, Ribbon Road doesn't only reward good drifting. This track also delivers players a veritable smorgasbord of different techniques and mechanics contained within 8 Deluxe. Mushroom cuts, regular shortcuts, on-track hazards, brief anti-grab and glider sections. Ribbon Road has just about a little bit of everything in it. The second half of this track specifically combines multiple different elements, driving on a ribbon waving in the air and containing two of my favorite shortcuts in the game. I love the way these shortcuts feel to pull off. They are deceptively difficult and so satisfying to do, especially if you get lucky timing and can manage to trick off of the main course onto the shortcut. This is exactly how shortcuts should work. High risk, high reward. The glider section afterwards is brief and unobtrusive while providing a fun and unique obstacle in the springy clown car heads. Ribbon Road finishes with an almost Peach Gardens-esque mushroom cut near the finish line. On Peach Gardens, if you don't get a boost item at the end, you're probably screwed, whereas here it doesn't feel quite as brutal of a detour without a boost. Put all these elements together and that's an S tier track right there. Briefly before I go, I also want to mention I adore the aesthetic of this track. Everyone being tiny racers driving around on a child's playset gives me big Smash 64 vibes, and I love it. The giant Mecha Koopas are such a nice touch to the toy theme, while also providing some much needed representation for a Mario enemy that has only appeared in Mario Kart on one track before this. The toy figure Toads at the beginning of the track are a welcome change from the same few Toad, Yoshi, and Shy Guy models Nintendo loves to sprinkle throughout 8 Deluxe. The skybox is by far one of the prettiest and most unique skyboxes in all of Mario Kart history. The various giant versions of carts scattered throughout the room, toy boxes laid haphazardly all over the bedroom floor. The entire track almost feels like an homage to Nintendo's past as a toy company, and I think that really just adds an extra layer of importance to Ribbon Road.
As for why I'm keeping it in C tier, I don't really like how it feels as much, particularly the blue section. I find that being forced into a situation where you have to either pick between drifting or tricking at any given time is a bit awkward. Otherwise, I chalk this placement up to being very similar to Dragon Driftway, where I can say that I really like the way the track is designed, but I just don't ever really feel like racing on it very often. On a different day of the week, this is probably a B tier. Superbell Subway is a track that I think a lot of people sleep on, because I genuinely believe that there is no track that plays quite like Superbell Subway does. It takes a hard look at what Toad's Turnpike does, and dares to ask, what if we did a traffic track that was like actually good? And you know what? Cars give you too much space. What if we made this a game of Snake? And a game of Snake this is, because drifting around these trains is genuinely some of the most tight racing lines you may ever experience while playing Mario Kart 8. And the track layout absolutely supports you taking these lines, because it just feels wonderful. You just get that really good variety of, in first place, just getting these really satisfying close quarters lines where your driving skills are really being put to the test. This is definitely one of the most mid-pack friendly levels as well, as just getting a couple mushrooms opens up for you to take shortcuts all over the place, especially at the very end. The dynamic way that the train cars particularly make the track more narrow to allow for more offensive items to flourish is great too, because it also gives the person at first more of a chance to go further out of their way to avoid getting stuck in these tight, narrow spaces where they get hit by items. And then finally, people in the back, they don't gotta worry about anything because they can just power item through every single train car, and it's honestly pretty dang good. Though I'd be lying if I said it's all good, because at the end of the day, it does favor the person who sits in first a little bit more than others, and I have seen some massive breakaways on this track. But you know, this is one of the more dynamic tracks in Mario Kart 8, and I think it deserves to be respected as such.
I guess we're on Big Blue. And now, you probably heard my rant about Mute City and was like, oh, he's probably going to say bad things about Big Blue. No, Big Blue is still goated. Big Blue is still very goated. Probably is not going to end up making my top 10. But Big Blue has the same thing going on as 8 Rainbow Road, where you have the absolutely crazy item odds that you'll get on that one section. And I feel like Big Blue not only takes the fact that it has this weirdness to it in strides, but also kind of just fully is able to play off of it, because it creates this very interesting dynamic of, on Big Blue, you kind of generally know when the shock's going to be put into play, but you don't know when it's going to be used. And I feel like that tends to result in, with almost everyone having power items, this kind of like really huge mind game of you know the shock's gonna come, but you don't know if you're gonna be ready for it. And even outside of that, that only really tends to be one part of the mind game, and a lot of times the shock isn't even what determines the race, but it's an extra just aspect that happens. Big Blue's shortcuts in Section 2 are absolutely insane. I don't even know how to do the second one, but the first one is always extremely satisfying. I think it's the one track that I think, there's a reason it was my number one for so long. I can't say it still is, but there's so many aspects that make a Big Blue race what it is, and it really does offer something that no other track does, in the fact that you have, again, some of the only base Mario Kart 8 Deluxe expert shortcuts that you'll get. It has that, it has the shock dynamic, it has a split path that actually does things correctly, it has a very open section with dirt cuts that can steal you some spots, but also the open nature of it means that any single person on this last stretch can get hit by items. It has so much dynamics how it can play out, and it plays unlike any other track in the game. It has so much going for it. It uses its coin mechanics well, where it feels like it allows you to just fuel up and get to your maximum speed right out the gate, and then for the rest of the race, it's barely an aspect that you're even thinking about. It just lets you get straight into the action, and then man is there action. And action unlike any other track in the goddamn game.
And that is where the tier list rests for today. But I'm not done yet, because at this point, don't you think this tier list is starting to get a little bit bloated? So, why don't we do something about that? Let's first start by color coding, where red are the Mario Kart 8 Nitro tracks, yellow are retro tracks, green is the WiiU DLC, and if we do that, well, this is still quite a bit overwhelming, but let's simplify this and get the icons out of the way. This is better, but I don't think this quite demonstrates my point good enough yet. So, why don't we do the totals of where each tier rests in terms of how many tracks are in each category. In our top 10 contenders, we have 1 Nitro track, 3 retro tracks, and 1 DLC track. And alright, at first it seems top heavy in terms of the retro tracks, but then we have our S tier, which are tracks that I am very confident aren't going to end up in the top 10, but are tracks that I nonetheless find zero flaws in. And in here we have 2 WiiU DLC tracks that fit perfectly. In A tier we have 3 Nitros, 1 retro, and 1 DLC. And in B tier we have 2 Nitro, 2 retro, and 5 DLC. And then we get down into C tier, where I no longer have strong feelings one way or the other. We have 3 Nitro, 4 retro, and 3 DLC. Pretty even. And then in D tier we have 2 Nitro, 2 retro, and 3 DLC tracks, which is starting to look pretty bad for DLC, until we get to the F tier, where we see 5 Nitro, 4 retro, and then only 1 DLC track. So, this gives us an idea of how the racing tiers break down, but that's not enough. This is still quite a bit of an overwhelming grid to look at, so why don't I simplify this even further? This region up here represents all of the tracks that I have positive feelings for. This section down here represents all the tracks that I have negative feelings for. And if we break it down into those numbers, we'll see that of the tracks that I have positive feelings for, I only enjoyed 6 Nitro tracks and 6 Retro tracks, which is not even half of the tracks in the game when it first released, which is very embarrassing. In the DLC, there was 9 tracks that I liked, which is well over half of the DLC tracks. And then if we repeat that same process for everything below C tier, we'll see that there are 7 retro tracks that I actively disliked, 6 retro tracks that I actively disliked, and only 4 DLC tracks I actively disliked. So with this big picture, we can kind of figure out that even nowadays, after the fact that I have grown to love this game, from the base game, there are nearly as many tracks that I dislike as there are tracks that I like. And as we are really beginning to see here, the WiiU DLC was a massive step in the right direction. But this is still very clearly skewed in the direction of me disliking almost half of the tracks in the game. So, I'll see you next time, where we talk about the Booster Course DLC Pass and how it taught me to love again. Until then, have a good one.